Good morning. It's Uncle Lou here. Yep, that's right. It's me, Uncle Lou, live on LouTube for you. And some of you are not too happy to see me this morning. Yeah, you know what's coming. It's time for the Your Season is Over video. The only Sunday morning college football recap video that actually matters. Go anywhere you want. Find highlights, stories about great players, how good the teams looked. It's not what we do here, though, is it? Nope. Nope. Today we point and laugh. Before we get to the, I need water already. I brought 2 cups of water in here because I know this is going to be a long one and a good one. Okay, let's see how that do. What that water do? Before we get to the trash talking, let me say something. And I've said this a few times this year at the start of these videos. Yesterday is everything I love about college football. I mean, everything. Rivalry games, big upsets, nail-biting finishes, come from behind finishes, late season matchups determining conference title placements, division placements, and determining matchups for conference title games. Playoff trips on the line yesterday at the end of games for multiple teams. Records broken. Just an absolutely unbelievable day of college football on a day that, I'm going to be honest with you, I was not expecting that much yesterday. The slate of games was okay. You had Southern Cal, UCLA, Oregon, Utah. Those were 2 of the best games of the day heading in, at least it looked like, and those ended up being great games. But you looked at the noon games, kind of a nothing burger, or so we thought, and then the noon games happened. And you're seeing these top teams struggle. And then the afternoon games come around, and you're seeing more top teams struggle. And then the primetime games come around, and you're seeing a huge upset. Finishes down to the wire involving top 15 teams in the Pac-12. Teams losing and losing it all. Losing all hopes at playoff chances or conference races or whatever. It was just an unbelievable day of college football. And I know it seems like, or at least sometimes it seems like all I ever do is get on here and laugh and yell and scream and rant and rave and hoot and holler about Georgia doing something terrible or some other team doing something terrible or how I'm mad about this or laughing at that. And I do enjoy that part of college football. No question about it. It's as much a part of college football to me as anything else is. But my God, if you watched college football yesterday and didn't come away a bigger fan than you already were before yesterday started, then what in the world were you watching? Unbelievable day yesterday. All right, now that we got that out of the way, it's time to pry open some people's mouths and take a giant dump down their throat. Doesn't matter really where we start. West Virginia, okay, big friggin' deal. West Virginia lost again. They lose every week. I know, it's really not a big deal. But they lost to K-State, and that's the only reason I really have it on here. K-State beat them 48-31. And the thing with West Virginia, well, there is a reason I'm starting with West Virginia in the Big 12, which we will get to momentarily. Don't worry. We'll get to momentarily. It looks like it's going to be K-State versus TCU for the Big 12 championship game. More on that in a second. West Virginia and Neil Brown, are they going to fire him? JT Daniels-Christ has been benched there as starting quarterback late in the season. That appears to me as though they're already focused on next year, and by they, I mean Neil Brown and the coaching staff. I don't know what, if any, conversations Neil Brown has had with athletic directors and administration at West Virginia about his future, potential future, whatever. I've got no idea. But it appears as though they are planning on being back next year because they're already looking forward to next year by benching JT Daniels and going with the younger guy at QB. I'm not saying that's the right or the wrong decision. I'm just saying this late in the year, when you're already out of contention for everything of meaning, really the only point in switching quarterbacks is to go ahead and start looking forward to next year. Of course, I think Neil Brown should be fired. I said that in the offseason. He's not a great coach. He really shouldn't be a Power 5 coach anywhere. I don't think he'll ever be a successful Power 5 coach. He shouldn't have been hired. But he was. Hasn't worked out. He's gotten consistently worse the entire time he's been there. And he 100% should be fired. I think it's going to come down to money. I don't know West Virginia's financial situation. I think his buyout is around $18 million. That's a lot of money. Now, we're used to the Jimbo Fisher thing where you're talking 80, 90 million. Okay, well, compared to that, that's not a lot of money. But, 18 million is still a lot of money. I just don't know if West Virginia's going to pay that this year or not. I've got no idea. I think they should if they have it and they can afford it. If he gets fired, who's replacing him? The only real name I've really even heard batted around is Hugh Freeze. So, I don't know. But West Virginia has been a complete failure again this year. It's not a surprise to Uncle Lou at all. Predicted it in the offseason. And, with Neil Brown and Jimbo Fisher, yes, they both should be fired. And they will if the schools can afford it. So all you Texas A&M people who keep telling me that Texas A&M's got all this money and they can afford an $80 or $90 million buyout, we're about to find out 1 week from today. Because Texas A&M's last game is next week. They're not making a bowl game, so their last game is next week against LSU. Win or lose, if they've got the money, they'll fire him because there's no other reason to keep him. And I think the same is true for Neil Brown in West Virginia. If Neil Brown still has a job, I'll give it till Monday. If Neil Brown still has a job a week from tomorrow, next Monday, not tomorrow, but a week from tomorrow, then West Virginia's keeping him because they don't have the money to fire him. If Jimbo Fisher still has a job a week from tomorrow, then Texas A&M's keeping him because they don't have the money to fire him. It's that simple when it comes to these things. Anything else we need to talk about with the Big 12 before we move on? TCU and Baylor, we're going to talk about that when we get to the teams that won part of the video. Oh, my God. One of the craziest endings you'll ever see. But before we move on with the year season is over, there is a little bit of ceremonial business that we have to take care of. There was another game yesterday in the Big 12. I didn't take either one of these helmets down, and I did that intentionally. Texas beat Kansas. What in the world does that say? 55-14. Kansas was a good story at the beginning of the year, just like Syracuse and Duke and whoever else that started off good. No one saw it coming. The reality is they're not a very good team. That showed itself the second half of the season. They've lost umpteen games in a row, it seems like. But the important thing, at least for this video and for this channel, is, of course, happening right up here on the helmet shelf. Kansas beat Texas last year. It was hilarious. It's hilarious every time Texas loses. Duh. But it's particularly funny if they lose to Kansas. And we had a good time with it last year when they got shellacked by a terrible Kansas. Whatever you think about Kansas this year, they were way worse last year. Still beat the Shorthorn. Shorthorns absolutely destroyed them yesterday. Last year when Texas lost, we turned the Texas helmet upside down. We put the Kansas helmet on top of it. And we said, we're not changing it. We're not turning the Texas helmet the right way. And we're not taking the Kansas helmet off until next season, which is now this season. And we're only doing it if Texas beats Kansas. Well, not only did they beat them 55-14. And I think the Texas fans owe Uncle Lou a little bit of credit for this impressive victory. Obviously, the pressure of constantly appearing on the Uncle Lou background, upside down underneath the Kansas helmet, has had an effect on Texas, and I think it motivated Texas in this game. I think I'm as much responsible for this Texas win over Kansas as any Texas player or coach. I think I deserve equal credit. But it is time to right the wrong. So here we go. Let's slide some helmets over. I'm trying to do this where y'all can see it without falling down at the same time also in too. Let's move the Kansas helmet over. There we go. And ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, here we go. Almost fell. Did you see that? Ladies and gentlemen, the Texas Longhorns have been returned to helmet shelf glory. Right side up, no longer underneath the Kansas helmet. Let's get a round of applause for the Texas Longhorns. That would be great. What do you want to do next? Man, yesterday was weird in a lot of ways. Shout out to Maryland. Y'all tried real hard. Pineapple Jr., quarterback for Maryland. Yesterday was weird in a lot of ways. One of the weirdest was you started watching the noon games, And what was happening? Michigan was struggling. It looked like they might lose. TCU was struggling. Looked like they might lose. That's 2 top 4 teams. Well, what happens anytime top teams, undefeated teams, highly ranked teams, popular teams, whatever, start losing early in a game? What happens? Everybody starts pointing and laughing. Everybody makes videos, myself included. I'm not immune from this. Everybody starts running to comment sections and leaving comments, right? I was doing it. Ohio State fans were doing it during the noon games when Michigan was losing. Well, then the 3:30 games come around and Ohio State and Georgia kick things off. And what happens? Georgia struggles, Ohio State struggles, and Michigan and TCU fans who had come back to win their early noon games, they run to the Georgia and Ohio State places and start pointing and laughing at them. Right? That, again, it's one of these things about college football that just separates it from everything else. It made yesterday, it's one of the things that made yesterday so amazing. But Maryland did lose, and that means Uncle Lou lost. I predicted in the offseason that Maryland would be not a great team, but good enough to beat one of the big 3 from the Big Ten East, Michigan, Penn State, Ohio State. Yesterday was their last opportunity, and they crapped the bed. But they gave it their best shot, though. Ohio State was up 3 late in that game, 33-30. Drove down, bogged down again offensively, had to kick another field goal, so it was still at that point a 6-point game. Maryland gets the ball back late with a chance for a game-winning touchdown drive, and the Ohio State defense made a play. They got to the quarterback, pressured him right as he was getting ready to throw the ball. They hit him. It was doesn't really matter whether it was a fumble or a pass attempt because the defender caught the ball in the air. So interception, fumble, whatever you want to call it. The Ohio State defender catches the ball, 20-yard line, whatever it was, and walks into the end zone. And Ohio State ends up with what appeared to be a comfortable win in the end, right? 43-30, I believe the final score was. But that was a 1-score game with a minute or 2 to go. Georgia, same thing. And we'll get to them when we do the Kentucky thing. I made a video about that. I mean, you already know how I feel about the Georgia game. But the reality is, did TCU struggle? Yes, but they won. Did Michigan struggle? Yes, but they won. Did Ohio State struggle? Yes, but they won. Did Georgia struggle? Yes, but they won. Now, when these types of things happen early in the season, it can affect rankings. We saw that, right? Ohio State is undefeated. They were ranked number 1 earlier in the season. Early in the season, it's a lot easier to move teams up and down in your top 25, whether you're talking about specifically within the top 5 or 10 or just top 25 overall. The later you get in the season, I think people are more willing to give a benefit of the doubt for a close win in a game that maybe people expected wouldn't have been so close, right? It doesn't really matter this late in the season. I guess what I'm trying to say is you hear this phrase, a win is a win. A win is not a win in college football. It becomes more true, though, later in the season if you're undefeated, right, or sitting on 1 loss with playoff hopes, then that does kind of become true. But a win is not a win in college football. If it was, whenever Ohio State was ranked number 1, they'd still be number 1 because they've won every game they've played. So we know a win is not a win because college football is subjective and you've got human beings ranking the teams, right? But the later you get in the season, especially when you get down to only a handful of undefeated teams left, in this case 4, as long as those teams win, their ranking is likely to stay the same unless one of those wins is against another highly ranked team. But in other words, Ohio State struggling with Maryland is not going to cause Ohio State to drop in the rankings. Michigan struggling with Illinois is not going to cause Michigan to drop in the rankings. Georgia struggling with Kentucky is not going to cause, you get what I'm saying here. TCU, blah, 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 you know what I'm saying. Earlier in the year, yes, you have less body of work to look at and things like that. But this late in the year, 4 undefeated teams, if they win, they're likely to stay the same. Now, next week might be different with Ohio State and Michigan. If Ohio State comes out and beats Michigan by 40, I'm not saying that's going to happen. I'm just making an example here. If Ohio State, the 2 team, comes out and beats Michigan, the 3 team, by 40, maybe the playoff committee moves Ohio State to 1 because Georgia's playing Georgia Tech. Terrible team. So But I think you understand what I'm saying. So, yeah, they struggled, but they won. And this late in the season, that really is all that matters for those particular teams. Because Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and TCU, if they win their remaining games, they're in the playoff, period. It doesn't matter whether they win their remaining games by 1 or 0. So, in that respect, at least for those teams going forward the rest of the year, yes, a win is a win. So, Big 12 title game. It looks like this isn't set in stone, but it looks like it's going to be Kansas State and TCU. TCU plays Iowa State this week, and then the Big 12 title game. I've been on record since like week 4 or 5. I think TCU's a good team, but they're dancing too close to the fire. Eventually, they're going to get burned. It looked like it might be yesterday. It wasn't. The ending of that game was unbelievable. And you know what that's a sign of? Because you and I both know TCU is by far and away, the least talented undefeated team. I don't think anybody would argue that, right? Georgia, way more talent on their roster. Michigan, Ohio State, way more talent on their roster than TCU. But the end of that TCU game, you know what that showed me and what that's a sign of? An extremely well-coached team. Extremely. They had no timeouts. 15 seconds to go. They run the damn ball. They're in a field goal wins it. They ran the ball with 15 seconds left. Do you know how much confidence and trust you have to have as a coaching staff and your offense to call that play there? You have to trust that the center exchange with a quarterback is going to be good. The exchange between quarterback and running back is going to be good. You have to trust that your running back is going to have a mental clock in his head and knows when to go down so that he has enough time for the offense to run off the field and the field goal unit to come on without the clock hitting 0. You then have to have enough trust in your field goal unit to be ready, and as soon as the player is tackled, to run out onto the field, immediately get lined up without jumping off sides, without false starting, without screwing up the snap, without screwing up the hold, and without screwing up the kick, and doing all of that in about 6 seconds. And TCU did it to perfection. To perfection. The minute that running back hit the ground, every single player on that offense was sprinting to the sideline. The field goal kicking team was sprinting onto the field. They immediately got lined up right over the ball correctly. The snap was perfect. The hold was perfect. The kick was perfect. The clock hit zeros, and TCU won the game. And they have lived like this all season. Now, this was the closest to the razor's edge they've been, by far. By far. But they survived. They beat Baylor on the road. Hostile environment. Baylor played a good game. I thought TCU did not play their best game, particularly on offense, but they, again, found a way to win. It's just unbelievable. I know that TCU is not a big brand, and I know that in the first month of the season, no one was paying attention to them. I was barely paying attention to them in the first month of the season. If you are not watching TCU games at this point in the college football season, you are doing yourself a disservice. They might be the funnest team to watch this year in all of college football, because no matter who they play, and no matter where they play them, it's going to be a 1 or 2 score game in the fourth quarter, and it's going to come down to the last possession every single week. And I've been saying for months that I think it's going to catch up with them and they'll catch a loss. I'm running out of time. Texas last week was the best team they had remaining on their schedule. They were a 7-point underdog. They beat them by 7. Yesterday, they were favored over Baylor by 2.5. They won by 2. This week, they play Iowa State. They'll be favored by what? A touchdown, maybe? Not much. Don't you think they're going to win? I mean, I still kind of feel the same way, like it's a whole bound to lose type of deal, but God, they keep proving everybody wrong, myself included. And you kind of can't help but pull for them, because they're not a powerhouse team. They're not a quote-unquote blue blood. They're not one of these schools that's in the playoff hunt every November. They're not one of these teams that's made the playoffs a bunch of times. They're TCU. There's like 9,000 students that go there. I'm making that number up, but it's a small private school, not a lot of students, not a lot of fans, at least, nationally. I mean, I'm not putting them down, but they're not exactly Notre Dame or Alabama when it comes to national fan bases. I mean, let's just call it what it is. It's kind of a good story here, right? We liked the Kansas story in the beginning of the year. I'm not comparing TCU to Kansas. TCU's been a pretty good football program over the years. Never great, but a lot of times good. But how can you watch TCU as a college football fan unless your team is playing them, right? Don't you find yourself kind of pulling for TCU? I don't know. You guys tell me if I'm wrong, but I don't know. It feels like a great story. Now, if they get into the playoffs, I think we all know what's going to happen. The talent will overwhelm them in the playoffs, is what I think would happen. I can't imagine a game against Georgia being close. I can't imagine a game against Ohio State or Michigan being close. You go on down the list. You start getting to some of the fringe playoff teams, and I think maybe that would be a good game with TCU. Clemson, TCU, who would you take in that one? LSU, TCU, who would you take in that one? Southern Cal, TCU, I'd probably take Southern Cal there. UCLA and TCU, probably be a good game. Oregon, Utah, one of those. TCU, maybe a good game. But when you look at the top of the ranking, it's hard to imagine TCU hanging with a team like Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan. Well, maybe one or two, whatever, one or other two teams maybe you want to name. But if they get to the playoffs, if they go undefeated and get to the playoffs and get blown out in the first round by whatever team, that's not proof they didn't belong in the playoffs. And if that's what happens, that's what we're going to hear in the comments section and even by some people on TV. Oh, they shouldn't have been. Look, I knew it. They shouldn't have been there. Teams get blown out in the first round of the playoffs every single year. We've been over this year after year. Georgia blew out Michigan last year. Alabama blew out Cincinnati. Didn't mean they didn't deserve to be there. Ohio State has lost a playoff game 31-0. Didn't mean they didn't deserve to be there. Michigan State lost a playoff game 38-0. Didn't mean they didn't deserve to be there. Lots of teams have gotten blown out. Oklahoma's gotten blown out. Didn't mean they didn't deserve to be there. There are blowouts almost every single year in the first round of the college football playoff. If that happens to TCU, it won't be that they didn't deserve to be there. It'll be that they're the team that deserved to be there that got blown out. It happens almost every year. But TCU is just a great story. And I wanted to talk a little bit about the Big 12. That's the only reason I even put the one Big 12 helmet over here today. And I wanted to do the ceremonial Texas deal. But the Big 12 and the Pac 12, for my money, have been the most exciting conferences this year. The SEC's had some great games, no doubt about it. The Alabama-Tennessee game was amazing. There's been several others, but the two most exciting conferences, top to bottom, for my money, this year, the Pac-12 and the Big 12. And I feel like those might be, and probably are, the two least watched conferences in the country. I know the SEC and the Big Ten get the most eyeballs. The ACC is probably third because there's a lot of Southeastern teams in the ACC. The Big 12 and the Pac-12, I don't keep up with TV numbers and all that, and I don't really care how many. I don't care how many people watched the Southern Cal UCLA game. I watched it, and it was a hell of a fucking game. It was a hell of a game. I don't care how many people watched Oregon and Utah that came on at 10:30 last night. I watched it. It was a hell of a damn game. A hell of a game. Well, okay, Pac-12. Utah. Speaking of great games, Bo Nix played, which surprised me. I did not think he would play. I did not think Bo Nix would play. I guess we'll put the Utah helmet here, maybe. Doesn't matter, but we'll put the Utah helmet there. Bo Nix did play, and that surprised me. I didn't think he would. If you remember, he got hurt late in the game last week against Washington, a game Oregon lost, costing themselves a potential playoff spot. He did come in at the end, though, last week. But then all week this week, you had the coach playing the 3-card Monty with, well, he's kind of practicing, but he's kind of not. He might play, he might not. He's 70%, he's 80%, and then even in pregame warm-ups, he's out there, he's fully dressed, he's going through his warm-ups and all that, and they ask the coaches, and game time decision, that kind of deal. The coaches probably knew on Tuesday that he was going to play, but you know how these coaches do. They think everything's a government secret, so they didn't want to announce that to Utah. So Bo Nix did play, but it was pretty clear to me it wasn't 100%. One of Bo Nix's biggest qualities this year has been his ability to run around, both taking off downfield and extending plays and things like that. Very little of that last night from Bo Nix. He was able to throw the ball, but it was clear he wasn't able to move around like he normally is. I think the only significant run that he had that I can remember was at the very end of the game. Oregon desperately needed a first down to kind of put the game away. They were up close late in the game where like one more first down kind of ices it, that kind of deal. Bo Nix took off running. It was only like a 2-yard game, but he dove, picked up the first down. It's really only a significant run I can remember from Bo Nix. But Oregon did get the win against Utah. Oregon likely now to play in the Pac-12 title game. What was the score of that one? 20-17, low-scoring game. More low-scoring than I thought it would be. I thought we'd see some more points in that game. Cam Rising did not play well. I think he had 3 interceptions in this game. That is very unlike him. Is he a top 3 or 4 quarterback in the country? No, but he's a really, really good quarterback who has been around forever and has a ton of experience and rarely makes mistakes, especially in key situations, and he did it yesterday. It was just not Utah's day, and Oregon comes out on top. They're now 9-2. They've got 1 game left. I'm assuming they'll win it and finish 10-2 and punch their ticket to the Pac-12 title game, where, of course, they will be taking on not UCLA, Southern Cal. I'm torn on Southern Cal. We talked about TCU and how good of a story it is. Southern Cal is a major brand, unlike TCU. Southern Cal has been in hiding for 15 years, basically. And last year was the bottom of the barrel. Last year was the worst season they've had in 50 years. 50. If you just go by record and winning percentage, it's the worst season they've had in 50 years. They bring Lincoln Riley in. Okay, we have seen him at Oklahoma. We know what to expect with him. Southern Cal's defense last year was one of the worst in the country. Well, okay, we also know what to expect there with Lincoln Riley, right? It's not necessarily what we're getting. Caleb Williams is having a great year offensively, no doubt about it. And those wide receivers they brought in are playing well. Jordan Addison had over 100 yesterday. But they run the ball really well. And I'm not going to try to piss down your leg and tell you that Southern Cal plays great defense. They don't. This was a shootout game up into the 40s. It's unbelievable to me, the turnover situation for Southern Cal. Not just yesterday, but over the course of the season. It almost seems like they've just been living and dying, and mainly living off of turnovers. The defense, look, Southern Cal does not have an elite level defense, but their defense is a lot better than what I thought it would be in year 1 under a Lincoln Riley team that brought his same defensive coordinator with him from Oklahoma. And they won again. So they still just have the 1 loss. They beat UCLA. Dorian Thompson-Robinson, or whatever his name is, had that costly interception at the end of the game. And Southern Cal hangs on and wins 48-45. This was an unbelievable game. UCLA was up 14-0 after the first quarter. Southern Cal came back a little bit, and at halftime, UCLA 21, Southern Cal 20. And then in the second half, it was just touchdown, 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 one after another by each team. It was unbelievable. Just a back and forth type of deal. And you honestly felt like whoever got the ball last was going to win the game. But then guess what? Southern Cal, that defense and those turnovers popped up again. And they get an interception at the end of the game. Game over. Southern Cal wins 48-45. Playoff hopes still alive. The only team in the Pac-12, in my opinion, with a shot to make the playoffs at this point is Southern Cal. And if they win out, they're getting in, because that's a good win they had over a good UCLA team yesterday. This week they play a red-hot Notre Dame team who beat the absolute soul out of Boston College yesterday and also has the win over Clemson, right? They're red-hot. Southern Cal plays them. Notre Dame's ranked. Probably Notre Dame might be in the top 15 this week. So Southern Cal's going to have a win over a top 15 UCLA, a win over a top 15 Notre Dame if they win, and then they've got the Pac-12 title game, which is going to be against the top 15 Oregon. So they're playing 3 top 15 teams in a row to end the season. If they win all of those games, and they're sitting there at the end of the year with a conference title, a 12-1 record, and 3 wins in a row over ranked teams, they're getting in. That will be the best 3-game stretch to end the season of any team in the country. Never mind the playoff contending teams. Now, there are teams that have individual games that are tougher than any of those 3 games that Southern Cal has. LSU, for one example, they played Texas A&M, or they played UMass yesterday. That's a nobody. They play Texas A&M this coming week. That's a nobody. But then they play Georgia in the SEC title game, which is the toughest game anybody can possibly play. So that one game for LSU, yes, is tougher than any one game Southern Cal has, but nobody's got a 3-game stretch to end the season like Southern Cal does. And if they win out, they're getting in at 12-1. Now, will they win out is a totally different question and scenario. We already talked about TCU and their remaining schedule. They've got Iowa State left, and then they're going to play the Big 12 title game against probably Kansas State. Y'all tell me, who do you think, if you had to pick one, if I told you one of those teams is going to win out, either TCU or Southern Cal, which one do you think it'll be? Which one do you think it'll be? Will it be TCU that finishes out at 13-0 and makes the playoffs, or will it be Southern Cal that finishes at 12-1 and makes it? Or will it be both? It could be both. You could be looking at a playoff right now that's Georgia, the winner of Ohio State and Michigan, Southern Cal, and TCU. That you could be looking at that. And then if one of those teams loses, particularly TCU or Southern Cal, because they're out if they lose. Georgia can lose and still get in. They're probably the only team that can do that at this point. Georgia can lose a game and still get in. The other three, if they lose, they're probably out. Who would be the next team up, do you think? Would it be the loser of Ohio State, Michigan? Would it be a 12-1 Clemson if they beat South Carolina this coming week and then beat North Carolina in an ACC title game? Is there any way a two-loss team sneaks in it? It's going to get interesting. Well, it's going to be boring if TCU and Southern Cal win out. If TCU and Southern Cal win out, the playoffs are set. It's Georgia, the winner of Ohio State, Michigan, Southern Cal, and TCU. That's your 4 playoff teams. If either TCU or Southern Cal lose, it's going to get very interesting for that 4 spot. We'll see. We'll see. But UCLA, your season's over. Utah, season over. Whatever else we've talked about so far, too. Speaking of Clemson in the ACC title game, North Carolina lost to the friggin' Nerds. I'm going to put you right next to the nerd helmet. I should put the nerd helmet on top of you, but I feel like we're getting kind of carried away with the moving helmets on top of things. We might take a break from that for a while, but good God. You lost to a terrible Georgia Tech team with no head coach. North Carolina, it has been a lot like TCU this year, in my opinion. Now, they're not the same type of team. They run 2 different styles of football. North Carolina's got an amazing offense with a Heisman quarterback and no defense at all. TCU's got a really good offense with a really good QB in Max Duggan. They play okay defense at times, and obviously they're undefeated, and North Carolina had the 1 loss. But North Carolina just, all these close wins. Last week, North Carolina beat a terrible Virginia team by 1 point. You kind of got the feeling with North Carolina they were trending towards another loss too. Now, some people thought that loss may not come until the ACC title game against Clemson. But you had some people, as recently as this past week, asking me, Lou, what happens if North Carolina wins out and beats Clemson? Would they get in? And I said, I don't think so, because they're just ranked a little too low right now. But the idea was there was just no way that's happening to begin with. I mean, I didn't need to see North Carolina lose to Georgia Tech yesterday to know that they're going to lose to Clemson in 2 weeks. Did you? They're not a very good team. They're Tennessee. That's basically what North Carolina is. Tennessee. How did we make it this far into the video and we ain't talked about that? Are my tards okay? Don't worry. We're going to talk a little bit about Tennessee, I promise. Hug a tard if you see one. God knows they need it. God, they need it. Hey, they want to know if there's a website anywhere where you can trade Peach Bowl tickets for Sugar Bowl tickets. They're interested. These idiots went out and bought Peach Bowl tickets, which is the first round playoff game. Now they know, well, if they're lucky, they're headed to the... let me stop with the Tennessee thing. We'll get back to that. What was I even talking about? No, North Carolina. Yeah, North Carolina's Tennessee. Quarterback putting up ridiculous numbers. Pretty good offense. No defense at all. Skating by. And they lost again. So any chance North Carolina had of making the playoffs, or anybody that thought maybe they would have, that's out the window. They lost to a horrible Georgia Tech team. Good on Georgia Tech, though. If you remember back to last year, Georgia Tech lost their last 2 games of the season by a combined total of like 105-0. Georgia was the last game. I don't remember who they played the week before that. I honestly don't. Somebody can type it into comments. But they lost their last 2 games of the season last year, 100-something-0. This year, they're going to go 1-1 in their last 2 games of the season. So that is a big win for Georgia Tech. Whatever we think about North Carolina and playoff chances and ACC chances and all that, it's still a ranked team. They're still one of the best 20 or 25 teams in the country, and Georgia Tech beat them. That is a big deal for the Nerds, especially considering the fact that next week, they're just going to get absolutely demolished. They got to play Georgia in Athens, and Georgia's liable to hang half 100 on them again, like they did last year, especially considering the fact that yours truly, Uncle Lou, will be at the game in person. And I know for a fact, I know this for a fact, Georgia is not about to trot that team out there in front of me on Saturday and have another below average mediocre performance like they did on the road yesterday against Kentucky. I know they're not going to do that. They're going to come out and play lights out, balls to the wall, and probably beat Tech by 50. But North Carolina, your season is over. You're still making the ACC title game, which you're not winning. And the other thing is, you blew any. You were worried about the playoffs. It wasn't. You probably wouldn't even have made a New Year's Six game. It's possible if you'd have won out and only lost to Clemson, maybe you sneak into a New Year's Six. That's out the window now. You'll be playing the Cheez-It Bowl like Clemson did last year. That's where you're headed. North Carolina, your season is over. These people got absolutely destroyed at Auburn with a lake. Clemson. Where's the damn duck? I had to take the duck off for scientific reasons earlier. Don't worry, got the duck right here. Put the duck right back on there. Where it goes. The Miami Ducks got absolutely destroyed by the Clemson Taters yesterday. This was never a game, never a contest, and I didn't expect it to be one all week, and it wasn't. This is, I think I might have said this last week on the Your Season is Over video. I know I said it on some other videos. I'm not trolling. I'm not even trash talking. This is the worst Miami team I've ever seen in my lifetime. And I started watching college football on TV in the mid to late 80s. This is the worst Miami Hurricanes football team I've ever seen. I made a video about this the other day. They've got locker room issues, culture problems. And I hate to, I love Coach Coop. He's probably the nicest guy on all of YouTube. I met him at the Slob Olympics. He's a great guy. But part of Miami's problem, in my opinion, is the whole the you thing, 5 rings, all of that. It means nothing. It means absolutely nothing. And by continuing to perpetuate the lie that is Miami today is Miami 25 and 30 years ago, is causing problems today in Miami's locker room and on the field. These players and coaches cannot live up to what the fans, some of them, still view Miami as, which is a powerhouse, nationally relevant football program. They aren't. They aren't. And before you tell me I'm wrong, Miami has been in the ACC for 18 years. They haven't won it a single time. The whole 5, Coop wears the hat all the time that's got the 5 on it. That's not who you are. It's literally no different than somebody, some Harvard or Yale fan running around screaming about 28 rings. It doesn't mean anything. And the kids that are at Harvard and Yale now can't live up to the Harvard and the Yale that won 28 rings 100 years ago. And the Miami program now, not only is the Miami team, we know the Miami team is not on the level of those teams from 25 and 30 years ago that were unbelievable in winning national titles. The program is not on that level. It's not. And heaping those type of expectations on every new coach you get every 3 years and every player that comes in, and bringing Ed Reed to come down there and hover around people with a no-show mob job, none of that is helping. The fans running around with all the U gear, all about the U. You might as well, you'd be better off running around with something that said it's all about the Lou. Because I'm more relevant. Listen to me. And you're gonna think I'm just bragging and being big-headed, and I kind of am. I kind of am. But listen, and this is going to be a hard pill for you to swallow. But like everything else I've ever told you about Miami and your football program, this is also true, okay? Uncle Lou is more relevant in the world of college football today than the Miami Hurricanes football program is. No one cares about the U and the 5 rings. They don't. No one cares about Ed Reed or Ray Lewis, or whatever other players y'all think should be down there hovering around the locker rooms nonstop. This is the worst Miami team I've ever seen. You've got parents bitching and moaning publicly to the coaches about their kids not getting enough playing time. Like this is rec league football. This is bad. The best thing that can happen to Miami, in my opinion, is that their fans throw away every single piece of merchandise they own that says the U or has any reference to 5 rings. Throw it all away. That's step 1. Step 2, don't ever mention it again. Step 3, about 20 or so players on that roster need to hit the portal the minute you lose to whoever you're playing next week. And you need a complete start over, a complete do-over, ground up rebuild, not just of that team, but of that entire program. And if you are convinced that Mario Cristobal is the man to do that, then I don't want to hear a single Miami Hurricanes fan talk about firing him for a minimum of 5 fucking years. 5. You're nowhere close. For a while, Florida State was playing around in the mud puddle with you. Not anymore. Florida State's a top 15 team right now in college football today. And because of the way Florida State has turned into a top 15 team this year, it's not a one-hit wonder deal. They had patience with Mike Norvell. They suffered through a couple of bad years. You know what they didn't do? Constantly yell about a national title they won with Jimbo Fisher while Mike Norvell was struggling 1 or 2 years, having to clean up the mess that was left behind by the previous administration. They gave him time. They let him build a roster through recruiting and key transfers here and there. They suffered through humiliating losses without bitching and moaning about the U and 5 rings and how Ed Reed and Ray Lewis need to save the day. They were patient. And now Florida State's one of the best 15 teams in the country today. And because Mike Norvell and that staff were allowed to build that program the right way from the ground up, they're likely to be a top 15 team next year and the year after and the year after. This isn't a case of 2017 Miami where you have one good year where you win 9 or 10 games and then you're right back in the friggin' toilet again. Any team can do that. Look at Tennessee this year. Look at Kansas this year. Look at Northwestern or Minnesota a couple of years ago. Who else has had one good year out of the friggin' blue? Michigan State makes the playoffs out of the blue. Now they're battling for bowl eligibility. Anybody can do that once every 5 or 6 years if they get lucky or get 1 or 2 transcendent players. To develop a top 15 program takes time, patience, hard work, and dedication. And your big brother to the north in Tallahassee has done that. And history tells me that when Florida State starts to roll, they don't stop for a while. So I'm here to tell you right now, this is not a 1-year problem. This is a 20-year problem. You're in year 20 of this problem. It's not getting solved next year. It doesn't matter who the coach is. You're not winning 10 games next year. Florida State is. And one of those 10 wins is going to be against you again. You know what you need to concentrate on right now? Recruiting, patience, being supportive of the coaching staff, and hoping that next year you beat teams like Middle Tennessee State and Duke, because you're not beating teams like Clemson and Florida State next year. You're not. You're not. And running around with hats that say 5 rings and talking about the U from 30 years ago isn't going to change that. Just like it hasn't changed it any over the last 20 years. Uncle Lou is more relevant in the world of college football right now than the Miami Hurricanes are. It's a sad reality, but it's reality nonetheless. Speaking of things that are sad, look at this pile of shit right here. Jesus. Look, I try to tell y'all all the time, the box score doesn't always show you what really happened in a game. In other words, you can look at a box score and see that a team won by 10 points, but if you watch the game, you can go, you know what? I know they only won by 10, but they completely dominated that game from start to finish. Could have and should have been a lot worse. The Georgia-Tennessee game is an example of that. There's lots of examples of that. The opposite is also true. You can look at some box scores and see, look at the Ohio State-Maryland box. If you just looked at Ohio State-Maryland yesterday, you know what you saw? You saw that Ohio State won 43-30, and you're probably thinking, well, it's a two-score game. Game probably never in doubt. It was Ohio State kicked a field goal with 2 minutes to go to give themselves a 6-point lead. Maryland had the ball where at the end of the game where a touchdown wins the game. They throw a pick, game over. It's pick six, game over. But so the box score doesn't tell the whole story. Vandy and Florida is one of these situations, isn't it? This score does not tell you the story of this game. Florida lost 31-24, and you're thinking, well, I just looked at the box score. That's only a one-touchdown game. Vandy absolutely dominated you. They absolutely dominated you. I saw Florida fans on Twitter and comment sections on Facebook and YouTube during the first quarter of that game when it first started. Oh, look at this. This is a home game for Florida. There's more Florida fans up here than there is Vandy fans. Well, then you lost at home to Vandy then, because they absolutely destroyed you. The team was unprepared yet again. Sloppy mistakes yet again. What is that an indication of? Poor coaching. I want you to look at the end of the TCU game, and then I want you to look at Florida special teams over the course of the season. Night and day difference. And guess what? TCU has a first-year coach, Jack, just like you do. So save me that, well, this is his first year there, woo. It's Sonny Dykes' first year at TCU, and he would have the Horned Frogs running circles around you when it comes to special teams and pretty much anything else. That botched punt return, free touchdown for Vandy. My God. I pray Anthony Richardson comes back next year. I pray he comes back next year. Well, the main person I hope comes back next year is Sunbelt Billy. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's got no idea. And the Florida fans can say, well, you're a Georgia fan. Of course, you're going to say that. It's just a fact. He didn't deserve that job. He doesn't know what he's doing. He's in over his head. The same things I've been telling you is all true. It's all true. Will you be better next year? Maybe. You're a 6-win team this year. Yeah, maybe you win 7 or 8 games. Is that what you want? He's never even going to get you to where Tennessee is right now. It ain't going to happen. You will never be playing in November with a playoff spot being a possibility, ever, under Billy Napier. It will never happen. You will never play a single game in November with Billy Napier as head coach where you have a chance of making the playoffs. It's not going to happen. So hang on to him as long as you want. Keep drinking what is this called? We'll call this the Sunbelt aid. Y'all had the whole Mullinade there. Oh, yeah, you're not ready for this Mullinade. Turns out the Mullinade was poisonous, is what it was. And I don't know, whatever this stuff y'all are drinking from Sunbelt Billy, as far as I'm concerned, you can get one of them, what are those things? The Jaws of Life. Yeah, you can go get yourself one of them Jaws of Life that they use to rip cars open. Go get you a Jaws of Life, insert it right here. Open your cake hole as far as it'll go and guzzle that damn Sunbelt Billy aid or whatever you're calling it. He doesn't know what he's doing. He got blown out and humiliated to Vandy. Worst start in the SEC for Florida in 50 years with the whole 1-4 deal. You lose to Kentucky at home. But Georgia just is so far ahead of you, you can't even see them. It's just embarrassing. Tennessee has passed you. Well, I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know what's going on. And as bad as Miami is, I'd rather see, you know what? I would rather see Miami and Florida play this coming week than I would Florida and Florida State. You know why? Florida State's going to beat the absolute soul out of you. I mean, it's going to be, they might beat you worse than they beat Miami. What did they beat Miami, 45-3? They might beat you worse than that. They might beat you worse than that. What about the recruiting, Woo? You haven't signed a recruiting class yet, buddy. And they don't call this flip season for no reason. Stay tuned. Stay tuned. Florida. What a fucking joke. Another team. It's hard to hate on Kentucky. Now, it wasn't hard to hate on them earlier in the year because their fans were just beyond delusional. Not to a Tennessee fan level, but after they beat Florida, they just were all over the internet. I can't wait till the Georgia game in November. The SEC East is going to be on the line. We're winning the SEC. We could be a playoff contender. Meanwhile, you're busy losing to teams like South Carolina and Vandy. I thought Kentucky played a pretty good game yesterday. Georgia obviously did not. I talked about the Georgia game right after the game ended. Georgia played like complete shit. Some of y'all, I know there's some people on this channel who only got here maybe last year. So you've only seen Uncle Lou videos from when Georgia happens to be really, really good. But I'm here to tell you right now, I don't make excuses. I don't sugarcoat. I ain't no damn Disney dog. Georgia's not a perfect team. When Georgia plays bad, when Georgia does something wrong, when a coach screws something up, when I think a player's not any good, I'm the loudest person on the internet when it comes to criticizing Georgia when I think they deserve it, and they deserve it for yesterday. Kirby should not have went for it on that fourth down. It was a 16-point game. That's a 2-possession game. Kicked the field goal is 19. That's a 3-possession game. There is no way Kentucky is coming back to win down 3 scores. Now, they didn't come back and win anyway. We went for it and didn't get it, so we stayed stuck at the 16 for there. But you kicked the field goal there. Stetson Bennett played horrible, probably his worst game of the year. He was so bad yesterday. He threw a pass early in the third quarter. One of the worst passes I've seen in all of college football this year. First of all, it was a bad decision to make the throw. The mechanics of the throw were bad. The ball fluttered and hung in the air way too long. It was thrown into double coverage. It was way underthrown. And guess what? It was intercepted. They did not allow him to throw another pass for the entire game. In 2022, we had to watch a starting quarterback go out there for a quarter and a half and not attempt a single pass. Now, Kenny McIntosh, he played great, almost 150 yards rushing. He played great. But the short yardage situation for UGA is unacceptable. The Jalen Carter thing at fullback is not working. That was a clever idea last year to do with Jordan Davis. A fan favorite, a personality bigger than every room that he's in. That was fun to see. It was fun to see big Jordan Davis get in at fullback. He even scored a touchdown. That was fun to see. That's not something I need to see every year. We don't need to take our best defensive tackle every fucking year and put him in at fullback every time it's 1 yard to go. It's not working with Jalen Carter. And I'm not blaming just Jalen Carter. The offensive line got pushed into the backfield every time it was 3rd and 4th or 1, and that's completely unacceptable. I know Kentucky's one of the more physical teams in the SEC, and that's great. Good on them. I'm proud of them. Talent-wise, they're so far below Georgia, it's ridiculous. And when it comes to short yardage, and there's just no creativity. I mean, Kentucky knew what we were going to do. They knew we were just going to run it up the middle, and they knew we couldn't. But we ran it up the middle anyway. Aggravating. Where do we even start here? I feel like the low-hanging fruit would be to start with the fans, but, and look, the reality is we all know that there is a certain portion and percentage of Tennessee fans who have been around for basically the last 6 weeks, about since they beat Alabama, that are completely football ignorant, that have no idea how any of this works. They have been saying some of the most ridiculous and just completely obnoxious things possible. And they've been extremely loud about it. And this is the problem, because everyone gets painted with the same brush in these scenarios, okay? And I'll give you an example involving myself. There are people that watch my videos and don't like my style, or whatever you want to call it, of college football talk. And then they go, look at Lou, Georgia fans are blah, blah, blah. Not all Georgia fans are like me, clearly. Not all Tennessee fans are dumber than a drawer full of dead batteries. Unfortunately, they're very loud. And so they get a lot of attention. And we'll get to some of the stuff about the fans, I'm sure. But let's just start with the team itself and the game last night. Much like TCU, you play with fire, you're bound to get burned. Now, TCU hasn't got burned yet. It felt like, I don't think anyone is surprised that Tennessee's defense has now cost them a game. I'll just put it that way. Not that anybody expected this yesterday or last night from South Carolina, but over the course of the season, really it should have been the Alabama game. Alabama's a better team than Tennessee. It's just a fact. Tennessee had that game at home at night, biggest atmosphere there in probably 25 years. They had some key things go their way in that game, and some key things go against Alabama. I'm not talking about referees. I'm talking about a missed kick for Bama, a made kick for Tennessee, right? And then you had the whole blown coverage situation with Bama. Bama committed 17 penalties. Now, that's Bama's fault, but still, they committed 17 penalties. Bama's a better team. And that's why we all knew that if Tennessee and Bama were to ever play again, Bama would be favored again. They're just a better team. That should have been the game where Tennessee fans, coaches, whoever else realized, okay, we can't get where we want to go with this defense because your offense played great. Your offense played way better against Alabama than they did against South Carolina last night. Offense played almost a perfect game against Bama. And you had to survive a field goal at the end of the game to win. That's how bad your defense was in that game, is, and has been all year. So that really should have been the game where your defense cost you, but you got through it. And it sort of blinded you and masked you. And you saw this from a lot of Tennessee fans, not even the delusional ones. Some of the more realistic and knowledgeable Tennessee fans even got suckered in on this one. Well, okay, our defense isn't great, but we can outscore everybody. Well, no, you can't. No, you can't. And one of the reasons that I'm not surprised, and one of the reasons that I kind of had this feeling about Tennessee from the beginning, and I've said it a bunch of times, even if Tennessee gets into the playoffs, they're going to lose. Georgia has found itself in similar situations to Tennessee this year in years past, but flipped. There's been a lot of years where Georgia's defense was clearly good enough to win a national title. Clearly. Last year wasn't the only year Georgia had some great defense. Go back and look at defensive stats as far back as you want to go since Kirby got there. Georgia's had a defense good enough to win the national title almost every single year. But what has happened when Georgia has lost games? Well, go back to the last game Georgia lost, the SEC championship game against Alabama. The defense didn't show up. The defense had an off day. And the offense wasn't good enough to overcome that. LSU, 2 losses to LSU off the top of my head I can remember. Same thing. Defense didn't play well, and the offense isn't good enough to overcome it. Florida in 2020, same thing. You have to be really good on both sides of the ball. You just do. All this comparison Tennessee fans were making to 2019 LSU never made any sense at all. Look at all the defensive players that got drafted off of that LSU defense. LSU's defense was infinitely better than Tennessee's in 2019 than Tennessee's is this year. And so you kind of got suckered into the, well, we'll just outscore everybody. Well, you didn't have your best night last night offensively. Not that you played bad offensively, but guess what? Hendon Hooker had some key overthrows. I saw Jalen Hyatt drop a couple of passes. I don't think I've seen that all year. You ran the ball well, but you didn't run the ball enough. What's the Jabari Small, is that his name? Averaged over 6-7 yards a carry. But you didn't run it enough. You got nervous and scared because South Carolina scored touchdowns on their first 5 possessions and you went into air it out mode. And that's worked for you in the past. It worked against Alabama. It didn't work last night. And smart people knew this about Tennessee for a while. That defense is not going to get you where you want to go. It's just the truth. You want to go out, the cat wants to go out. Come on, Monk. Come on, go out. Scratching on the door and that. How you doing? Y'all got absolutely embarrassed and humiliated last night. The records that were set and broken in that game, that's the most points an unranked team has scored on a top 5 team in over 100 years. At one point, South Carolina had scored touchdowns on 8 of 9 possessions. That's 56. They scored 56 points in their first 9 possessions. They scored a touchdown 8 out of the first 9 times Carolina got the ball. They scored eight touchdowns. Spencer Rattler looked like the best quarterback on the planet. Just like Anthony Richardson looked like the best quarterback on the planet against you. Just like Stetson Bennett's, 2 of Stetson Bennett's best games ever have come against Tennessee last year and Tennessee this year. Jaden Daniels can't throw for 100 yards against most teams LSU plays. He had 400 yards against you. 400. Alabama had 700 to 800 yards of offense against you. I mean, it's a gimmick. I don't want to compare. I'm not going to go as far as to compare Tennessee to Miami, although I could. Very similar situations. Haven't done anything worth a shit in 20 years, either team. Miami had the one good year in 2017 where they made a New Year's Six Bowl, then right back to irrelevancy. Tennessee's having their one good year now. Are they going to go back to irrelevancy? Probably. You're not fixing that defense, and it's not going to happen. Defense is going to be horrible again next year. Your offense is not going to be as good next year as it is this year. Joe Milton, tell me about Joe Milton. The receivers are leaving. One of the reasons Hendon Hooker has the numbers he has is because this is his second year, full year, running the system. Milton doesn't have that. Don't talk to me about practice time. It's a gimmick offense. South Carolina played a very similar game plan defensively than Georgia did, and South Carolina doesn't have anywhere near the talent defensively that Georgia does. So therefore, you scored 30-something points instead of the 13 you scored against Georgia. But it worked for Carolina. They kept things in front of them. They let you catch all those 6-yard comeback routes, because I've been telling you all for weeks, this is Tennessee's offense. Run a play, jump up as quick as you can, run back to the line of scrimmage, try to snap the ball before the defense is lined up so you can trick them. That's it. That's their entire philosophy. That's their entire scheme. The routes the wide receivers run, an occasional slant route, I'll give you that. An occasional slant. Other than that, the wide receivers line up as far out wide as they can, and they either run a go route or a 6 or an 8-yard comeback route based on the coverage the defense is showing them. If it's soft coverage, they run a comeback route. If it's tight coverage, they run a go route. That's it. 11 plays. Tennessee has 11 plays. How do I know that? Well, the announcers told us last night that during the week when they were meeting with the teams, they talked with Jalen Hyatt, Tennessee wide receiver, and they were asking Jalen Hyatt about the fast tempo, up-pace offense that they run and how they're able to pull it off. And he said, well, when the play is over, we get up, we run as quick as we can, we get lined up, we look over to the sideline, they signal into a play, we look down at our wristband and see which of the 11 plays we're running. That's what he said. That's what the Tennessee player said. 11 plays on the wristband. You've got 11 plays. None of them work unless you catch the defense before they're ready. That's it. It's a total and complete gimmick. It's another triple option. That's it. It's a type of offense that you only play once a year, therefore it becomes hard to prepare for. Right? Just like the triple option. But eventually, teams figure it out. How many teams ran the triple option 25 years ago, 30 years ago, 35 years ago? A bunch of them. I formation, bunch of them. Why don't they run that anymore? Defenses figured it out. This offense that Tennessee is running was tried at Oregon 15 years ago. It resulted in 0 national titles. It's a gimmick. And no matter how much Big Boy, the Shoney's mascot, or whatever it is y'all are calling your head coach these days, John Hopeful, thinks of himself, it's not going to work long term. And you're not winning a national title with it, ever. Never mind this year, which we all knew because of the defense. running around. We lost to Georgia on purpose. We lost to Georgia on purpose so we wouldn't have to play Alabama again in the SEC title game. Alabama's not in the SEC title game. Let's pretend for a second that's true. Let's just play this out. Tennessee head coach John Hopeful is so fucking dumb that he purposely lost the only remaining game on his schedule that mattered, the Georgia game, to avoid the SEC title game against Bama, a team that's not in the SEC title game, so that he could backdoor into the playoffs at the 4 spot if TCU and Southern Cal both lose. That's what you believe? Then your coach is the dumbest fucking human being on the planet. The only person dumber is you, if you actually believe that. If you believe that a coach who is paid to win games would ever intentionally lose any game, then you must have somebody following you around doing this, because you're so dumb, I don't even think your heart can beat on its own. I'm dead serious. That's how dumb you have to be. Why would you lose the Georgia game on purpose? Had you won the Georgia, listen to this, idiot. Had you won the Georgia game, yesterday's game wouldn't have mattered. You'd still be winning the SEC East. Just like if Georgia would have lost to Kentucky yesterday, it wouldn't have mattered. Georgia's already won the East. If you'd have beat Georgia, this loss yesterday wouldn't have meant anything. Nothing. You'd still be on the way to Atlanta to beat the shit out of LSU for the second time. This is how dumb your fucking coach is if you believe he lost the Georgia game on purpose. Thank God for the automatic nervous system or whatever it's called, because you'd be dead in 90 seconds because you'd forget to breathe. If you'd have beat Georgia, yesterday's game wouldn't matter. You'd still be headed to Atlanta with a trip to the playoffs on the line. That's how fucking dumb your coach is if you believe he lost the Georgia game on purpose. Or you can come back to reality and realize that you lost to Georgia because they're way fucking better than you. They dominated you. Hendon Hooker didn't know where he was at. He spent half the game with his dick in the dirt. And Georgia did whatever they wanted to offensively. That's why you lost the game. Not because John Hopeful said, let's lose this game on purpose so we don't have to play Bama in the SEC title game. No, as dumb as John Hopeful is, he's not nearly as dumb as you. Not even close. I'm serious. You're dumber than a junk drawer, man. Any of you that believe that. You're dumber than a junk drawer. And you make about as much sense as a bag. And I know some of y'all do this. Some of y'all do this, or your parents did it, or your grandmama did it. Losing a game on purpose, particularly that game, which is the one that mattered, losing that game on purpose makes about as much sense as these people. You go in their kitchen or their laundry room or whatever it is, and they've got a grocery bag hanging up filled with other grocery bags. That's how much sense that makes as much sense as a bag filled with other bags. You're fucking retarded. You're fucking retarded. Your season is legitimately over. You shit the fucking bed on national TV and everybody was watching, including Uncle Lou. You got embarrassed. You got embarrassed by Mr. Nice Guy, Shane Beamer. How does that feel? You know what this reminds me of? 2016. We might be looking at the next Butch Jones here with John Hopeful as head coach now. 2016, Tennessee had a great year. Tennessee has 3 rivals. In 2016, they beat 2 of them, Georgia and Florida. Well, what about 2020? They have 3 rivals. They beat 2 of them, Bama and Florida. Tennessee had it all wrapped up in 2016. All they had to do at the end of the year was beat a terrible 500 South Carolina team on the road in Columbia, and then a lowly 3-win Vandy team to close the season out. And they would have been in the SEC championship game in 2016. Well, this year, all Tennessee had to do was win on the road against a terrible South Carolina team and then beat a horrible Vandy team to wrap up the season. And there's a potential they could have been on their way to the playoffs. And the same thing that happened in 2016 with Butch fucking Jones happened again yesterday with John fucking Hypeful or Hopeful or Josh Heapful or whatever his name is. Let's call him John Hopeful. You went on the road to Columbia, South Carolina. What happened back in 2016? Do you remember that? Do you remember something strange happened? Do you remember what it was? Does the name Jalen Hurd mean anything to you? There was a point in that game in 2016. Tennessee had the ball. And Jalen Hurd was on the sideline taking a breather or a break or whatever. He was their running back that year. They got ready to send him back in the game. And Jalen Hurd said, "No, I'm not going back in." Ended up getting kicked off the team and all that. Who was missing yesterday? One of Uncle Lou's favorite punching bags from a couple of seasons ago, Jeremy Banks. Where was he? Where was he? Could have used him, couldn't you? Hell, you could have used me in that secondary last night. Never mind Jeremy Banks. So, yep, 2016, you go on the road, lose to South Carolina, everything crumbles. 2020, you go on the road, lose to South Carolina, everything crumbles. What happened in 2016 after you lost that South Carolina game? Did you finish the season strong with your head held high? No, you went and got humiliated by your big brother Vanderbilt. And who's staring at you for next week? A red-hot Vandy. A Vandy team that has beat Kentucky and Florida. Could Vandy beat Tennessee? We'll see. No Hendon Hooker. Shout out to Hendon Hooker. No Hendon Hooker jokes. Nobody likes injuries. Doesn't matter who it's to. I tried to look up some information on the injury before I started recording this video. There is no information that I could find. It didn't look good. It's one of these kind of typical non-contact deals. He was running in open space. He went to make a cut, and it looked like his knee just completely went out on him. It didn't look good. I hope he's okay. I hope he's able to play this week against Vandy. If he's not able to play against Vandy, I hope it's just maybe a sprain and he's able to play in a bowl game. If he can't play in a bowl game, I hope he's okay and it doesn't affect his draft stock at all. I hope he's completely and 100% okay, whether it's today, tomorrow, or next week. I don't wish anything but the best for Hendon Hooker. But now you got to play Vandy with Joe Milton. No Hendon Hooker. Jeremy Banks gave you one of these. I don't know. We'll see. But it all came crumbling down for you, Tard man. And this is an important lesson for you. First and foremost, learn about fucking football. You never should have spent too much talking about the playoffs when you didn't know shit about it. That's number one. Number two, all the shit you were saying has been proven over time to be not true. Your defense is horrible. It is going to cost you. You're not getting where you want to go with that defense. If and when the offense lets you down, you're going to lose because the defense can't bail you out. It is a gimmick offense. You only run 11 plays. All you can do is trick people. You're not better. In fact, you're worse than 90% of the teams you play. The only reason you get the majority of the wins you get is because you trick people, because you snap the ball when the secondary is still laying on the ground from the play before. All of that is true. Hendon Hooker's not an elite level college quarterback. He's not. He's a system quarterback. Any quarterback that stays in that system for 2 years is going to put up similar numbers to Hendon Hooker until teams figure out how to control and stop that offense, which is starting to happen now. Or until you play a defense so talented like Georgia, it doesn't matter. They can just dominate you because they fucking feel like it. But y'all lost every single hope, dream, everything you had for this Tennessee team at 6:45 p.m. Eastern Time yesterday afternoon is out the window and gone. All of it. You have a 0% chance to make the playoffs. None. I don't care how many teams ranked where lose. TCU and Southern Cal can both lose. Ohio State can lose to Michigan, and then Ohio State can lose the Big Ten title game to a nobody from the Big Ten West. Clemson can lose to South Carolina next week and then beat a terrible North Carolina team and finish 11-2. All of those teams are still going to be ranked ahead of Tennessee. Guess who else is going to be ranked ahead of you tomorrow? Bama. Bama's going to be ahead of you. Southern Cal's going to be ahead of you. Oregon might be ahead of you. Georgia, TCU, Ohio State, Michigan, all ranked ahead of you. And unfortunately, you're 10-2 with no division title, no chance at a SEC title appearance or play or win. It doesn't matter what you do to Vandy next week, and it doesn't matter what anybody else does next week or in conference championship week. You're not making the playoffs. You might make the Sugar Bowl. Might. Maybe. It's going to come down to you, Bama. I doubt Ole Miss. They lost again. If you lose to Vandy, though, guess what? Citrus Bowl, bitch. Citrus Bowl, Belt Bowl, Music City Bowl, Toilet Bowl, Mustard Bowl. Bunch of fucking dummies. Your season is over. This isn't an analogy where we just talk about teams that lost. Tennessee, your season is fucking over. So start preparing for the offseason. You should be used to it. You've been doing it since the day YouTube was invented. You can come back in February and start typing and drooling into the comments section about how this is the year and you're going 100-0 in 2023. Other than that, have a great day, I guess, Tennessee, man. What else happened yesterday? Some other teams lost, too. Talked about Florida and Kentucky. Maryland, talked about them. Illinois, Baylor, Tennessee, UCLA, Miami, Utah, North Carolina. Ole Miss got blown out by Arkansas. Boy, if you like old school football running the ball, well, you loved that game, didn't you? Was there 1,000 yards rushing in that game? I'm exaggerating, but KJ Jefferson was back. He played for Arkansas at quarterback, played great. Ole Miss, of course, loves to run the ball. Lane Kiffin was asked in the post-game, of course, about the Auburn job, and he had what I thought was a funny answer. Now, here's what you have to keep in mind. Maybe this is just me. I don't know. I'm not telling you to feel this way. When it comes to job openings and potential candidates, and those potential candidates are asked about that job opening, I don't believe a fucking word they say. Not one. I don't. I've seen too many coaches that are, I'm happy where I'm at, and then tomorrow they're taking another job. But so, of course, Lane Kiffin was asked about it after this humiliating loss to Arkansas yesterday. He was asked about what he thought about being the number one candidate for the Auburn job. And he goes, well, if Auburn watched the first half of this game, I don't think I would be their number one candidate anymore. And that's basically all he said. So nothing burger there. I don't know what happened with Ole Miss. It's one of two things. Or it could be both. But one of these two things is definitely true. Either he is taking the Auburn job. The team knows, and they've kind of cashed it in for this season because if the coach is quitting, why are we trying type of deal. Or number one, or like I said, it could be both these things. That Bama loss last week was just it for Ole Miss. I mean, they had everything on the line in that game. They only had the one loss. So technically, they were still alive for the playoffs. A long shot, but they were alive for the playoffs with just the one loss. Not only that, Lane Kiffin wants to beat Saban so damn bad he can't stand it. I feel like that game was circled for Ole Miss. They had everything focused on that game. And then not only did they lose, they lost at home. Not only did they lose at home, heartbreaking last-second loss. It was just a emotional drain. One or both of those two things is true as far as what happened with Ole Miss yesterday against Arkansas. And now they got to turn around and get ready for the Egg Bowl against Mississippi State, which is on Thanksgiving night, 7 or 8 o'clock. I'm going to be live streaming that game, by the way. So for those of you that are stuffed off of your turkey on Thursday and you're sitting around scratching your balls, getting ready to watch the Egg Bowl, Mississippi or Mississippi State or whatever, come on over to the channel and hang out with us. We'll watch the Egg Bowl Thursday night. But we'll see what happens in that one. West Virginia, again, just a complete disaster. We're an hour, whatever we are, an hour and a half into this video. I haven't even mentioned the fact that Bedlam was yesterday. Look, no one cares. I'm sorry. Oklahoma State fan, I hate to tell you this, no one gives a shit. They don't. I get it. This is a big rivalry. It's got a name. Bedlam. It's in-state rivalry. Oklahoma State. I get all that. The only people that cared were half the Oklahoma fans and half the Oklahoma State fans. Because the other half checked out 3 weeks ago anyway, and they won't be back until next June. But just nationally, no one gave a shit. I'm just being honest with you. And that hurts me to say that. One of the things I love the most about college football is rivalry games. I couldn't even get excited about this garbage here. Oklahoma and Oklahoma State. Oklahoma did win. Boy, the Big 12 it's get right day for the Big 12, ain't it? Texas gets their helmet turned the right way. We move Kansas off the Texas helmet because they finally beat Kansas after getting embarrassed by them last year. And I feel like it's only appropriate then we go ahead and turn the Oklahoma helmet back the right way. They did win their rivalry game yesterday against Oklahoma State and Gundy. For Venables, I think that's a big deal because let's be honest, Venables has been a disappointment this season in every imaginable and measurable way. Overall record, offensive performance, defensive performance, in-game coaching, whatever. There's nothing you can point to for Brent Venables this year that makes you excited. Nothing. It's been an absolute disaster, an abject failure for Oklahoma. But you win the Bedlam game at the end of the year, and except for the people that are watching this video, no one else even knows because no one cared. No one watched, but you won 28-13. I don't know what has happened to Oklahoma State. One of the best teams in the country the first 5 or 6 weeks of the year, ranked in the top 10, unbelievable offense, Spencer Sanders, Heisman talk. They have fallen off a cliff like I don't know if I've ever seen. I don't know what the hell is going on there. Is it possible that Gundy has taken a job somewhere else? Has anyone thought about this? Oklahoma State's decline this year started when coaches started getting fired at other places. Is Gundy going somewhere that we haven't considered? Is Gundy going to Nebraska? Is he going to Wisconsin? Is he going to Auburn? We don't know, but something has happened at Oklahoma State over the last 4 or 5 weeks because it's not like they've just gotten a little bit worse or lost a couple of close games. They're getting obliterated week in and week out like they never even existed. It's very strange. I know Oklahoma State's never been like a 12-win playoff caliber type of team, but man, you can always count on Oklahoma State to be competitive in the majority of their games and win 8-9 games a year. And then last year, they were even better than that. I don't know what's happened there, but somebody needs to ask Gundy what the hell is going on. This has been horrendous the last month or so for Oklahoma State. Talked about Kansas already. Who looked good yesterday? South Carolina. Spencer Rattler. Listen to this. Spencer Rattler was the worst, had the worst quarterback rating. Damn, I almost made it the whole way without having to do another sip of water, didn't I? Yeah, almost. Spencer Rattler had the worst quarterback rating of any quarterback in the SEC heading into yesterday. That's probably not the case anymore. But for the entire year, now 9 games. Yesterday was the 11th game, wasn't it? Yeah, yesterday was the 11th game. First through 10 games, he had 8 touchdown passes total. Yesterday he had 6. Wow, South Carolina looked good. Let's make this quick. LSU looked good, 41-10 over UAB, but UAB is horrible. They're under 500. Southern Cal's offense looked good. Defense looked terrible. Bama, 34-0 over Austin Peay. Kind of ho-hum. What are you going to do? Clemson, big win over Miami. Oregon over Utah, big rebound win. Penn State, 55-10 over Rutgers. Is Penn State a top 10 team? I know they got blown out by Ohio State and Michigan. They might be one of the best 10 teams, though. Georgia Tech, wow, huge win. Notre Dame, 44-0 over Boston College. Florida State, 49-17 over Louisiana. Texas, who looked bad? Everybody in the top 4. Georgia, Ohio State, Michigan, and TCU. Congratulations, you survived. Heisman race is a complete mess. Hendon Hooker, unfortunately, is done. C.J. Stroud had one of his worst games of the year yesterday. Blake Corum got injured. What does that mean? Drake May lost. That's huge for his Heisman chances. Probably not going to win it now. Caleb Williams had a great game. Caleb Williams going to win the Heisman? I don't know. Tennessee ain't winning a fucking thing, though.